The defining moment can be so small that all it takes is somebody to just jump on the slope and then boom, you've triggered an avalanche. It's a really weird feeling when the whole earth starts to move under your feet. I'm an engineer, and here in the Sub-Zero lab, I research snow. We recreate avalanches to try to understand how and why they actually work. This lab is really world unique in the fact that we have very good control over the weather in here.
We have the ability to simulate the natural weather conditions that can turn these regular, beautiful, six-sided snowflakes into a really deadly weak layer. We're really just trying to understand the fundamental process that causes a slope to fail in an avalanche in the first place. No one really knows what happens at the microstructural level.
When we observe avalanches in the field, we don't really get any of that in between. In the lab here, we can see everything that's happening from the point that there is not an avalanche to loading it up almost to failure and then after failure. So we really see the whole story.
There's equipment available to us to study the microstructure of snow that is not portable for the field. We can't lug a 500-pound CT scanner out into the field any day.
The CT scanner offers us the opportunity to see the microstructure of the snow in full, glorious 3 dimensions. So we can actually look at every single grain and every single bond that's in the microstructure. It really allows me to look at what's going to go on during fracture. This is what snow looks like up really close. This is a 3D image that I pulled out of the CT scanner. So once I've started with this sample, the next thing I need to do is identify the bonds. So I'm looking for these necks between the ice crystals, which is where fracture happens in the sample. The bonds are what are actually breaking when an avalanche happens or when snow fractures. So when I run my model, what I'm really looking at is how much energy does it take to propagate a fracture across a material. Strong snow tends to be composed of these rounded grains that are very strongly bonded to each other. Weak snow, or what we call facets, are very sharp, very angular grains, and the bonds between them are a lot smaller, which means the bonds take a lot less energy to break.
In the lab, we're really trying to understand why these types of layers cause avalanches. We're just trying to recreate everything that we see out in the fields. We can recreate a specific day over and over and over again. We have a beautiful sunny day in here, honestly. So if I wasn't doing a snow experiment, I'd just throw a beach chair out and get a tan. It's really powerful to be able to take such a natural experience and pull it into the lab and have complete control over it. We're going to basically be creating a weak layer in the snow here called radiation recrystallized facets, or sometimes called near-surface facets.
A facet forms when regular snowflake, or maybe a rounded snow crystal, is subjected to a very strong temperature gradient.
So with our strong solar radiation that comes into the snow and warms it up subsurface, as well as a cooling effect from the cold, clear sky right at the surface, we start to see vapor sublimation. We actually get water vapor that comes off the crystal and it travels along the temperature gradient upwards in the snowpack, and when it hits that cold spot, then all that vapor turns back into ice. And 12 hours later, we end up with these drastically different crystals that form a completely new microstructure and behave entirely different mechanically.
We've reached the end of a nice sunny day here with, at least in the lab here, a storm moving in tonight to lay down a new layer of snow that's going to create a pretty dangerous situation for avalanches in this lab tomorrow.
I'm at Bridger Bowl, which is a local Montana ski area. We got 23 fresh inches of snow, and the ski area is kind of crowded, so I'm gonna go out of bounds a little bit and see what I can find. My partner and I are right at the boundary of Bridger Bowl. We're about to hike up, and we'll be checking out avalanche conditions along the way. All right, let's do our beacon check.
Looks like you're good to go.
All right. Studying snow as much as I do, I'm kind of scared by default. I know exactly how weak these layers can be. I know how easy it can be to trigger a slab avalanche. The whole way up, I've been trying to get data out of the snow. It's a little less formal data than I might collect in the lab. I've been jumping on little tiny test slopes to see if there are any instabilities I can find. I've been poking in the snow with my ski poles to see if anything feels soft, like a weak layer underneath a slab. I'm doing an ECT right now and want to see how this new powder is bonded to the rest of the snowpack. So the first thing I'll do is isolate a column of snow. Just by tapping here, I got a fracture to go across the entire width of the column. And what that tells me is that if I were skiing a steep slope, just by putting my weight in one place, I could still propagate a fracture across the entire slope, creating an avalanche.
So we had overnight to let a slab layer form over our weak layer. So now I'm just going to be isolating a column underneath our shear frame. This surface here will be painted. It's kind of a random paint pattern. So the cameras can identify the pattern in the snow and watch how those individual particles are moving in relation to each other. So we've got two cameras here. They work just like our eyes. It can see in 3D. And these cameras, combined with a really powerful software algorithm, can track that paint pattern and tell us exactly how the snow is moving to pretty fine resolution. But the last thing that we need to do before an avalanche happens is to trigger it. Outside, that could be a skier, snowmobiler, snowboarder, doesn't matter. But in here, we control that with an actuator that we can control the speed and the rate at which we hit that snowpack. We've got everything set up for our mechanical tests and we're all ready to start loading it. So here we go. And there it just broke. It was really quiet, but it just broke. So in the lab, it's pretty anticlimactic, but if we were in the field, this would be probably a pretty large avalanche running down the mountain at this point.
Once we have all the data, it's just unmistakable that we've seen failure, and this corresponds exactly with where our faceted layer is.
It's really key that we can do this test in the lab, is we have pretty precise control over everything in here, not just the weather, but our load apparatus. That makes this test very repeatable, and we can compare one result to the next, and it's not based on human factors and trying to do a test out in the field.
When you're out in the field, you're getting a lot of good feedback on how the snow behaves mechanically, which is really important information if you're trying to assess avalanche risk. But I think what you miss out there that's really hard to do in the field is look at the microstructure. So I think even when you're out in the field, just pulling out your crystal card and looking for weak layers, trying to find a weak layer is really important. Sometimes the weak layers can be hard to find, but once you see those facets looking at you from the crystal card, it's pretty obvious that you're dealing with a weak snowpack.
We have to see every individual grain to understand how a whole mountainside might be working.
Avalanches affect everybody. Mountainous highways are critically affected by avalanches all the time. When a slope avalanches, that affects how quickly that snow is going to melt and enter our watershed. Most people here do some sort of outdoor winter recreation, and if you do go outdoors in the mountains in winter, then avalanches are going to be a hazard for you. Hopefully we'll be able to apply my research in a way that can help us save lives.